Breathe Through Panic. Introduction. On the morning of the 6th of August, 1945, there was a sparkling orangey flash that was much less bright than the summer sun. The blinding light was followed by complete darkness. The stench of burned dead bodies filled the air. People with melting eyeballs writhed in agony across the streets. Some individuals vanished, leaving their shadows indelible on the crumbling walls. People seeking safety and care flocked to a shrine with severe burns and curls in their hair. There was a lot of ruckus when the US exploded an atomic bomb in Hiroshima, Japan. Takeshi Tanimoto was just 7 years old when he witnessed the bombing. He was inside their makiya or urban house with his parents and siblings. When Takeshi turned to face his family, he saw that they were all severely burned. Their waifuku clothing was torn, and they all appeared to be monsters. He looked for his parents and found them in their room embracing each other and lying on tatami mats. His parents and siblings were no longer responding when he called them. He was groaning in suffering from the loss of his family members when his youngest brother, who was a baby, suddenly cried. He went to his shoki bed and found the burned baby there. He took a cloth and wrapped the baby and placed it on his shoulder. Takeshi overheard the commotion of people filling the street and yelling for assistance and alerting them of an impending attack. Takeshi believed there would be another bombing, so he took his baby brother, left the house, and ran to a nearby hill. Turning towards the city, Takeshi noticed that the once beautiful scenery had been engulfed in flames. He also noticed that there was widespread dejection and weeping, both of which were unheard of in the land of the rising sun. He found a bomb shelter, but it was simply a little cave, and it was already crowded with groaning victims. Takeshi embraced his brother as he felt the pains of burned skin enveloping him. After a few hours, he became aware of his skin peeling off in sheets. He also observed the blood bubbling and steaming as it spilled out of his wound, as well as the blackened pieces of his flesh hitting the ground and continuing to smolder. The wailing in the cave aggravated his thought, and he began to breathe in panic as he saw deformed bodies going near him. He was afraid that they were going to take his baby brother away from him. Or he would possibly be devoured. Then he went unconscious. Takeshi and the other people were rescued by Japanese forces. He never saw his brother again. He was brought to an institution that was later controlled by the Americans. The Hibakusha, or survivors of the atomic explosion, were gathered for an extensive scientific investigation of the consequences of the bombing on human biology and health. They described feeling isolated from their peers as they grew older because many people in Japan avoided those with physical limitations. Chapter 1, A Tale of Two Brothers. The brothers were separated for decades, but a custom would soon bring them back together. Hiroshi, Takeshi's brother, was saved by a high-ranking Japanese soldier, who took him in as his own. His foster father told him the truth. He helped him overcome the effects of radiation sickness. Hiroshi lived in Tokyo but experienced the same discrimination as a Hibakusha. He faced adversity all his life. He plowed through instance after instance of discrimination due to his scars. During his youth, he always experiences stares and whispers. Some people recoiled upon the mere sight of the remnants of the atomic bomb on his body. He has a hard time applying for work despite his outstanding grades in school. It is as if his scars are a barrier between him and his full potential. Potential employers most often than not question his ability by the mere sight of him. Even on public transportation, he would oftentimes be met with discomfort and avoidance. People would always assume that his scars were contagious. Despite these bitter experiences, Hiroshi refused to be defined by discrimination. He persevered and showed his resilience. The Japanese officer that adopted Hiroshi is a descendant of a well-known samurai clan. He made it a point to instill in Hiroshi the good values that his adopted son should strive to live for. One day, during a trivial gardening task in their home garden, the officer sought to imprint such teachings on his adopted son. Hiroshi, move that cherry blossom seedling on this table. The officer pointed to the seedling on the ground. Of course, Father. Hiroshi bowed before and after doing the task. The cherry blossom seeds symbolize the fleeting nature of life. At the same time, it also exemplifies beauty and resilience. As we work, I want you to take to hear the values that I'll instill in you. The Japanese officer looked at the boy that he took as his own. Yes, Father. I will remember the values you've taught me. Hiroshi was grateful for the opportunity to learn to be a better person from the man that took him as his son. Good. Always think of others, do your best, respect your elders, and know your role. These values are the foundation of our society and have been passed down through generations. They shape who we are. The officer nodded a few times while looking at Hiroshi. I understand, Father. I'll do my best to uphold them. Hiroshi replied with his head bowed. I expect nothing less from you, young one. Remember, life is not always easy. The values I'm teaching you will guide you through the challenges. It will make you a better person of integrity and honor. The Japanese officer paused and continued. Make our family proud. I will, Father. Hiroshi bowed his head in gratitude and reverence to his father. He was sent to Tokyo's art school due to his inclination toward sculpture, particularly pottery. Hiroshi embraced the principle of wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is a Japanese worldview centered on the acceptance of transience and imperfection. However, his peers quickly rejected his effort. Those who were prejudiced against him even shattered some of his pottery in resentment. An instructor shoved his work one day when he was trying to submit it for a midterm grade, causing the exquisite pot to break and shatter into segments. He gathered the broken parts and used the technique of kintsugi to restore the vessel and make it into an outstanding decoration that won a nationwide contest. Hiroshi became famous, but his talent is hindered by his ugly appearance. A woman fell in love with him, but their relationship was short-lived. The worst was the rejection of his lover's family due to the fear of the genetic impact on their possible children. Despite having steady work as a kintsugi artist, he was disapproved of. The Japanese art of kintsugi involves patching up damaged pottery with lacquer that has been mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. Good morning, Father. How are you? Hiroshi's voice carried a blend of respect and affection as he answered the call. It has been years since he was adopted and guided by this man. His father is now way past his prime, while Hiroshi is now a full-fledged man. Time flies indeed. I'm doing well, son. And yourself? The Japanese officer's tone resonated with paternal warmth, reflecting the bond forged between them. I'm fine, thank you. I wanted to talk to you about something. Hiroshi hesitated briefly, aware of the significance of his request. What is it, my son? His father inquired, sensing the weight behind Hiroshi's words. I wish to return to Hiroshima for the Obon festival. Hiroshi's voice trembled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Memories of the devastation caused by the atomic bomb lingered, woven into the fabric of their conversation. There was a moment of silence, as if the weight of their shared history hung in the air. Then, his father responded with a blend of understanding and concern, You're a grown man now, Hiroshi. You have the freedom to make your own choices. But do remember to take care and ensure your safe return. Hiroshi's heart swelled with gratitude for the permission granted, as he knew his father's words came from a place of love and protection. The unwavering sense of responsibility ingrained in their Japanese culture was palpable, encapsulated in his father's words. "Thank you, Father. I promise to be careful and I will make sure to return home," Hiroshi reassured, his voice tinged with determination and respect. Whenever Hiroshi celebrates the Obon festival, he finds solace. He believes that during the aforementioned festival, he might interact with his deceased biological parents. He held his face and no longer noticed the scars caused by the bombing, but the keloid on his chest reminded him of his past. He was unable to communicate with any of his relatives in the past, which is a sad truth. He made himself busy with repairing broken pottery, hoping that he could do it with his own life as well. His foster father, however, told him that he had a brother, but his work prevented him to arrange their meeting. Obon is a yearly celebration done to pay tribute to and commemorate one's ancestors. Around this time, when it is said that all souls return to Earth, the majority of families hang lights to guide their ancestors home or leave offerings for their ghosts. Takeshi has also longed each year to reunite with his parents and other siblings during the Obon festival. He has sent invitations in the past through her wife's social media but received no response. In his old age, he is still hopeful to see the remaining members of their family. He took the paper lanterns and hung them in his room and on doorways. He is just on another island, looking out the window and glancing at the red and white lanterns decorating the streets of most towns and cities. He looked to his right and saw someone creating a mukibi, a tiny bonfire that aims to welcome the spirits and aid them on their way back home. Takeshi felt uneasy. The fire had traumatized him. He is reminded of the atomic bombing just by glancing at it. He went inside his room and passed by a mirror where he saw his reflection. He looked like a scary creature. He had an eggplant-colored face, a huge eye, a stick-like nose, no eyebrows, and lips that were also up and down and open. His unsightly reflection becomes clearer as the mirror shows reflections of fireworks exploding in the skies. He became scared of his reflection. Takeshi remembered the pain the scars has brought him. He remembered cremating his parents and siblings himself. He gently laid their blackened, swollen body atop a burnt beam in front of their house where he found them dead and set them alight. When he went home the following morning to collect their ashes, he discovered that their bodies had been partially incinerated. Not all of their bodies were evenly burned. The rest of their body was decayed and coarse. He couldn't bear seeing his family in that state. He removed a bit of his father's skull, following a typical practice in Japanese funerals of passing around a tiny piece of the skull with chopsticks after cremation. As soon as his chopsticks touched the surface, however, the skull cracked open like plaster and his half-cremated brain spilled out. He screamed and ran away, leaving his father behind. He abandoned him and all the other members of the family, in the worst state possible. Chapter 2: The Eerie Shadows of Hiroshima. The events in Hiroshima that August day altered the course of history. 90% of Hiroshima was destroyed, more than 80,000 people were killed, and in their place were shadows that served as a horrifying relic of their final moments. A plethora of ghostly outlines from window glass, valves, and even people in their final seconds could be found throughout the center of Hiroshima. The radioactive shadows of a city destined to be demolished were now etched on buildings and pavements. The post-apocalyptic wasteland became a terrible place to live. Because thousands of children became orphans, Hiroshima became renowned as a city of yakuza. These young genbakukaji or atomic bomb orphans were left to care for themselves in the absence of their parents. They were remnants of those who were not evacuated into the countryside. They stole in the streets to get by. A black market sprang up around a train station, with some local women setting up stalls to feed the orphaned children. However, their resources were insufficient since there were too many individuals who needed to be fed. The government also established food banks, but they only served around half of the inhabitants. The local officials encouraged people to leave the place and go to the countryside. Takeshi chose to stay in Hiroshima as he felt his parents and siblings are still there. He also believed that he will see his baby brother and that leaving the place will mean abandoning him. He collected garbage and sold them in a recycling shop to survive. Once in a while, he goes on a medical mission sent by the Americans to help the nuclear bomb victims. The long lane discouraged him, but he needed some medicines for his wounds. Takeshi's hair fell out, his wounds became gangrenous, and he vomited almost daily. Despite his condition, Takeshi tried to help anyone who is in need. He would share his food with the needy. He even uses his medicines to cure the wounds of those who were abandoned in the streets. He also took care of stray animals. His golden heart would allow him to meet the love of his life, Yumi. Takeshi initially encountered Yumi one afternoon while picking up garbage on the street. She was walking alone, her face expressionless. Her lengthy, disheveled hair hid her face. She then collapsed and went unconscious. Her weariness could be due to the blazing heat of the sun. Takeshi raced to her assistance and led her to his tent. He realized she was suffering from a high fever. Takeshi took a piece of cloth and put some water on it. He put it on her forehead. He also ensured she is hydrated by letting her drink some warm water from a piece of clean cloth. He stayed all night taking care of her. "Where am I?" Yumi asked as he scanned her surrounding. "You're here in my tent," Takeshi answered with a smile. He suddenly felt shy as it is his time to talk to a woman. "Who are you?" Yumi tried to sit down but she felt too weak. "Stay in bed," Takeshi encouraged her to remain lying down. "You should rest." "I am hungry," Yumi muttered. "Here is warm water, take a drink." Takeshi gave her a cup and assisted her to drink. "I also boiled eggs, I already removed the shells." Yumi took an egg from the bowl and ate it. Takeshi looked at her and muttered, "I am Takeshi." That was the most comforting night both had experienced since the bombardment of the city. Yumi finally has someone whom he can depend on. Takeshi has someone to treat as a family. They become good friends. Yumi not only helped him collect garbage to earn some money, but she also assisted him in taking care of the stray animals Takeshi has been taking care of. Yumi accompanied him whenever he distributes food to the needy. Yumi felt a deep sense of respect for Takeshi as she comes with him in doing his charity works. She finally found a new reason to continue living. The gruesome sight of Hiroshima by day is no match when the night comes. Sounds of wailing could be heard from the innermost earth. Most people would cover their ears when they hear the weeping, but Takeshi approached it differently. He listened to them in the hope he could hear his parents and siblings and he could ask forgiveness for abandoning them. Takeshi had a nightmarish experience of how a shadow etched on the wall of a school moved and ran after him. He was sleeping in an improvised tent near an abandoned school when he heard a strange noise that woke him up. He went out of the tent to look for the source of the noise. He felt the chill of the autumn breeze. He found himself at an entrance of an abandoned school. The school was completely devastated by the bombardment, which is beyond description. A few rooms and a crumbling wall with the shadows of students carved into it are the only structures still standing. Takashi walked up to the wall as it flashed the moonlight. It seemed to imply that he should inspect the deteriorating walls. Takashi saw the shadows move, which sent a chill to his spine. The shadows formed into human-like beings. No, they didn't look like human beings, they were longer and larger. Their movement seemed to trap him. He saw hands trying to catch him. He noticed some bodies blocking his way. He ran away, but the shadows tend to follow him everywhere. He went back to his tent hoping to hide there, but he was surprised when he saw that his tent was no longer there. Some Japanese officers came and told him he is supposed to come with them as they are rehabilitating the place. They also took Yumi with them. Still scared of the shadows, Takashi agreed to come with the soldiers, where he was sent to an institution that was controlled later by the Americans. However, the scary shadows continued to haunt Takashi until he became a Christian and a pastor in a congregation of Hibakusha. Chapter 3. The Mediums. Haruka was seated on the tatami mat for a while already. Her room was serene and adorned with delicate paper screens and a takonoma alcove. She closed her eyes for a minute to rest them from the stress brought by the soft glow of her laptop illuminating her determined expression. Clad in a yukata, Haruka's demeanor exuded a graceful calmness as she delicately scrolled down the social media feed on her laptop. Ethereal light beamed on her face as her fingers glided across the keyboard. She scanned the stream of posts of photos and videos that the search term Tanimoto returned to her. She smiled when she saw a funny clip of a cat. Realizing that she got distracted, she immediately scrolled down the feed. Minutes turned into hours as she painstakingly scrutinized every profile that bears her family name. After reaching out to numerous contacts, Haruka came to a strange conclusion. Most of their relatives that are survivors of the atomic bombing in Hiroshima are dying in strange circumstances. Although, there were still a few that were still alive and agreed to meet during the Obon festival. Haruka Tanimoto is a traditional 19-year-old girl in Japan. Haruka, as her friends call her, has an average height for a Japanese girl of 19 years old, her petite figure conveying a sense of youthful vitality. She has almond-shaped eyes, adorned with dark lashes, holding a glimmer of mystery and an intensity that hints at her untamed spirit. She had a rough life because her mother, Akemi Tanimoto, was blind when her eyes were severely damaged during the Hiroshima nuclear bombing, while Haruka's father died a few years after she was born. Not to mention that she and her mother were gifted with the ability to communicate with the dead. Both were spirit mediums. Her mother is what you would call an itako. Her blindness gave her extra sensitivity to the spirit world, while Haruka is grappling with the acceptance of the gift. Her mother Akemi was ridiculed and rejected by society because she was blind and had extremely burnt scars all over her body. She is now 80 years old, yet the scornful remarks that Haruka's mother usually gets remains unabated. Akemi Tanimoto experienced the horrors of the atomic bomb firsthand when she was young. She was one of the survivors of Hiroshima. The last image that she saw during that day was her father shielding her from the blast. Her father was incinerated immediately, but despite his effort to save her, she ended up severely burnt and blind. She had an extremely sad life. Who wouldn't have, knowing that almost every one of her loved ones died on that fateful day? She sometimes mentions names of her several relatives that she heard survived as well. Haruka made it her mission to get her mother reunited with her last surviving relatives during the Obon festival in Hiroshima. It was in one of these sessions that she noticed a subtle change in the temperature. The air grew heavy inside her room. As someone gifted with a third eye, she was all too familiar with these occurrences. But this time, something is different. She could feel an evil presence. The amount of hatred and contempt directed towards her by the entity was staggering. She shuddered as a chilling breeze landed on her skin. This raised the hair on her back. She was scared, extremely scared. It is clear to her that something otherworldly and something uninvited was in the room with her. All of a sudden, she felt a slap on the left side of her cheek. Haruka was alarmed because this is the first time she encountered a spirit that manifested itself with violence toward her. She clasped the laptop in her hand, and carefully put it on the tatami mat on the floor. A surge of emotion rose within her that compelled her to confront the evil entity. She remembered the chant that her mother taught her and proceeds to recite it. Oni no kan kan, bato no en, akuma no otoshitu, kami no michi wo, toki no tutoke, so no tameni, makoto no kokoro wo, muni date, where no tamashi wo, shishite mamaru. She repeated it over and over again. Each repetition is more forceful than the other one before. The chant is an ancient traditional chant to ward off an evil spirit. When her mother realized that Haruka also has the gift of conversing with the dead, this chant is the first thing that her mother taught her. The chant roughly translates to, evil spirits be gone, negative energy vanishes, sever ties with darkness, embrace the divine path, like the ticking of a clock, for that purpose, hold intentions in your heart, protect our souls, and so we shall defend. As she was reciting the chant, she heard a loud shriek coming from her mother's room. Haruka rushed to her mother's room. When she arrived, she saw her mother gasping for breath lying on the floor. Okasan! Haruka is in the act of picking up Akesmi from the floor when her mother pointed at her and motioned her to stop. She stopped on her track. Chant, our clan is being targeted by demons. We have to intervene. Akesmi pushed her body up and started chanting with her daughter, Haruka. As they were chanting, silhouettes of different beings moved to and fro in the room. It resembled a kabuki theater where monsters are depicted roaming an area waiting for someone to devour. There was a degree of dimness and some light enough for the creatures of the dark to manifest. These supernatural happenings are nothing new to Akesmi and Haruka. However, seeing and talking to the dead still gives them shivers because the majority of them are vengeful spirits who were victims of the nuclear blast. They had come upon a crazy mother looking for her children. There was also an instance of a lady waiting for the return of her lover. There were too many ghostly experiences, but the one with the grieving father stood among the rest. The father lost his wife and children in the bombing but was not aware he lost his own life as well. Akesmi was able to let the mother talk to her children by using her daughter as a medium. She was also successful in letting the lady communicate with her lover who also died in battle. They were able to let the father realize he is already dead and he could rest in peace as his family was in good condition in the afterlife. Akesmi even encountered a Uriah who threatened to hurt her and her daughter to avenge the loss of his family. Haruka, her daughter, has allowed her to calm down the spirit. Their tandem was effective in communicating with the dead. Akesmi thinks that life is always fraught with tragedy. She taught her daughter that grief is one of the foundations of human life. Both of them believe that when deep sorrow is felt, a real life begins to be lived. Chapter 4, Gift or Curse. Akesmi and her cousin Takeshi have several things in common. They are both genbakukaji or orphans of the Hiroshima bombing. They are both hibakusha or survivors of the nuclear attack. They both have gifts of communicating with the dead. If Takeshi sees dead people through shadows, Akesmi hears them. She has the gift of clairaudience. She was sent to the countryside after the bombing and was taken in by an institution for the blind supported by an international organization that promised aid to Japan. She was bullied by older children, so she became a loner. Aikesme would often hear someone calling her name while she is alone. She thought that someone is playing a prank on her, but she recognized later that the whispers were coming from a different dimension. She became sensitive to the noise and began hearing people asking for help. As she would awaken one night with someone shouting in her ears, her night got uneasy. There will be times when people are sobbing or whispering, but the majority of them will reach out to her for assistance. She got worried when her child Haruka manifested the same gifts. "I don't want you to experience this curse," Aikesme mentioned to her daughter. Haruka looked at her mother and consoled her. "You have helped a lot of spirits by sending their message to their families. I did it because I was forced. I am scared that the spirits will get mad and might hurt us," Aikesme revealed. "No, mother, you have been helping them because you loved to help." Haruka smiled. "Father told me that you volunteered to help Hibakusha in any way you can." Aikesme looked at her daughter and glanced at their family picture on the wall. She recalled how he met Haruka's father, a Hibakusha volunteer as well, who died of cancer when his daughter was young. His spirit told her that the cancer was also a result of the radiation and just manifested several years later. Aikesme recognized that the ability to talk to his dead partner was a gift. But hearing thousands of souls daily is a curse. Haruka's father stopped talking to her when he was able to send her his message that he loved her and Haruka. Aikesme was alone in her room looking out the window when she felt the arrival of a familiar spirit. She was correct, it was her husband who guarded their family after dying from colon cancer. His funeral was the saddest part of Aikesme's life. His death was worse than the loss of her sight during the nuclear attack. His loss was almost the end of the rope for her. Thanks to her daughter Haruka, who meant the world to her. Her husband's spirit came and comforted her. He told her to take care of Haruka, their daughter. Aikesme woke up from her selfishness that night and avoided self-pity. She used her gift as a medium for bridging the world of the dead and the living. The donations coming from her clients have enabled her to send Haruka to a Hibakusha school. There was also discrimination among the Hibakusha, especially for those who can afford a decent life. The wealthy had more influence over everything. Haruka was denied the highest honors, which was granted to her schoolmate whose parents made significant donations to the school. Due to Haruka's mother's intense love for her, the discrimination had little of an impact on her. But it was Aikesme's blindness that she was most discriminated against. In Japanese society, there is a prevailing notion that disability hinders productivity and disrupts harmony in the workplace. Because of this, Aikesme never found any employment. It is not uncommon that she and her daughter Haruka sleep in the night without food in their stomach. Aikesme had a vivid recollection of one instance when Haruka was just 6 years old. This conversation always gave her tears whenever she remembers it. "Okasan, I'm hungry." Haruka barely has the strength to whisper. Her voice carried the weight of hunger and longing. Her stomach grumbled. Tears flowed through Aikesme's blind eyes. She mustered enough strength through her willpower to raise one of her arms to brush her daughter's disheveled hair. Her hand trembles as she does so. "I know, my precious Haruka. Mama is so sorry." She choked on her words, her voice laced with grief. Haruka's eyes searched for answers in her mother's emaciated face. "Why don't we have any food, Okasan? Are we bad?" Aikesme's heart shattered at her daughter's innocent question. Her voice quivered with sorrow. "No, my darling, it's not because we're bad. It's just, the world has been unkind to us lately. Times are hard, and Mama hasn't been able to find enough to feed us. But Oka-san, I'm so hungry. Haruka's voice trembled. One can hear a mix of sadness and innocence intertwining in her words. Aikesme hugged Haruka closer to her chest. She doesn't have any food to give her. All an anguishing mother can give her hungry daughter is her warm and tender embrace. She hoped that this would be enough to shield Haruka from the cruel reality. I know, my love. Mama would give anything to make sure your tummy is full. But for now, all I can offer is my love and the hope that things will get better. Thank you for your sacrifices, Oka-san, Haruka whispered as she fell asleep. Aikesme's family is one of those who failed to receive help from the local officials. Aside from there were limited resources, women were not prioritized. There was also the concept of motenai, which emphasizes the avoidance of waste and the efficient use of resources. This concept sometimes led to a reluctance in accommodating individuals with disabilities. All Hibakusha or atomic bomb survivors like Aikesme suffer discrimination and social stigma because of many reasons. There was a prevailing lack of empathy, primarily because Japan is a proud nation, and the survivors are a chilling reminder of the nation's vulnerability. Fear and ignorance are also at play because of society's lack of understanding about radiation effects during that era. The fear of radiation and its potential to cause harm led to stigmatization and discrimination against Hibakusha. Furthermore, in Japanese society, high value is placed on conformity and social harmony. The visible scars of Hibakusha and their physical disabilities did not fit the societal norm. Chapter 4, Echoes of the Past. Yumi Tanimoto has considered herself partially healed from the effects of the 1945 bombing. Despite her ugly look due to her scars, she was able to find a husband and a job. Yumi, Takeshi's wife, also experienced the horrors of the atomic bomb as a young woman. She lost her entire family and was left scarred physically and emotionally. Yumi channels her grief into her work as a seamstress, creating beautiful garments as a symbol of resilience and healing. However, she carries the weight of survivors' guilt and often finds solace in supporting other survivors through various community organizations. The horrors of the atomic blast can never be fully erased from her mind. That single event caused her unfathomable misery for the remainder of her life. She could vividly remember the deafening silence immediately after the blast. She found herself burning in the middle of their wrecked house. She could still feel her heart pounding, trying to make sense of what happened. Then her tears started flowing on her young dirt-streaked face. Remembering her family, she frantically clawed the debris, thereby losing most of her fingernails in the process. Her hands trembled as she clung to any glimmer of hope that she would find her family alive and well. But her desperate efforts were met with the grim reality that unfolded before her. The sight of her parents lifeless beneath the debris almost took her sanity away from her. Their motionless corpses lay there with their face crushed by the weight that fell on them. Yumi tried so hard to find something to kill herself with because she doesn't want to be left alone in this world. That's when Takeshi found her and rescued her. Yumi shook her head and reminded herself not to cling to her past. She looked at her husband Takeshi. They are a lot older now, yet she could still see the boy that saved her life on him. Despite resigning from the church as a leader, when her husband retired as a pastor, Yumi continued to motivate the congregation through random acts of kindness. She just finished a set of dresses she will donate as a gift to some needy members of the church. They are beautiful just like you. Takeshi pointed at the fabric her wife was holding high. Yumi was trying to determine if the stitches she did blend with the material. She smiled in response to her husband. The smile revealed the scars on her face. She then quoted a biblical passage that reads, "Anyone who has two shirts should share with the one who has none." Amen to that. Takeshi replied. By the way, has anyone responded to the invitation for a family reunion this Obon festival? I haven't checked my email yet, but we have been sending the same invitation to our known relatives every year, but no one is responding. Yumi reluctantly responded. If only I knew how to press those buttons on your mobile phone, I would check it myself, Takeshi grumbled. Why are you so interested in a family reunion? Yumi complained. The church is your family. Being the eldest living survivor of the Tanimoto clan, Takeshi believes he has the responsibility of gathering together the members of his clan to show the breadth of their family network and to bring together distant relatives whom he has never met. Also, deep inside him, he longed to know what happened to his baby brother Hiroshi. Takeshi never lost hope of someday finding his baby brother alive. His wife Yumi left the room carrying a dress and came back wearing it. Is it beautiful? She lovingly asked her husband. Yes, your work is a masterpiece. However, you are more beautiful than that dress. The pastor told her wife. I got good news for you. Yumi showed her phone and showed her notifications. You have a message from Haruka, your niece. She will be coming with her mom Akesumi. Akesumi is your cousin. She paused and smiled widely. There's one more. She clasped her hand and giggled. Hiroshi, your brother found you and he's coming soon. Takeshi clasped his chest and broke down in tears, was speechless, and staggered back a few steps. Hiroshi, my baby brother. He has been searching for his brother for a long time, and every day he didn't find him it almost felt like part of him was dying each day. He held the scar on his face and hesitated that his appearance might not please his relatives and most of all, his little brother. Yumi hugged her husband and wiped her tears. We need to prepare food and their rooms. Yumi looked at the kitchen. But she noticed that her husband was just looking at the walls. He has not touched the tea that he prepared earlier. What worries you? Yumi asked. I could hear my brother crying every night. Takeshi replied. Sometimes I hear him blaming me for abandoning him. Haruka once asked for my help, but I was not able to give her any. Takeshi added. I was so focused on my ministry that I neglected my relatives. God allowed these things to happen for a reason, Yumi consoled her husband. She held his hand and gave him some money to buy food and bedding. Chapter 5, The Gathering of Souls. It was the second day of the Obon festival when Haruka and her mother arrived at Takeshi's house. The sun's rays were striking the Genkan, or the main entrance of the house. Yumi bowed down when she saw the visitors and smiled at them. Haruka removed her shoes and placed them in a shoe closet on the right side of the sliding door. After which she helped her mother and left her mother's shoes at the main entrance facing the door. Haruka hugged Yumi, which made the latter uncomfortable. Then she smiled at Takeshi, who was standing near the takonoma. The takonoma is an elevated area of the house where guests are welcomed. Then, they heard the sound of an automobile engine outside the house. Takeshi has anticipated the arrival of his younger brother. Hiroshi's red car parked on the side of the road, after which he proceeded to exit his vehicle. Yumi was all smiles as she watched how nervous her husband was. Haruka, on the other hand, was narrating to her blind mother what was happening. Hiroshi. My little brother. Is that you? Takeshi's voice wavered as he fixed his gaze on Hiroshi, who was now walking towards them. It is I, big brother, Hiroshi cried. Takeshi wailed and prostrated himself on the ground. Forgive me, baby brother, for losing you, he sobbed. I never stopped looking for you, he continued crying. Hiroshi dropped to the ground and picked up his elder brother. He helped him stand up and they both cried together. Everyone looking at them was also in tears. After a while, Haruka's attention was caught by a painting on the wall, and she noted its melancholy mood. She had a vision and premonition during this time and was afraid when the painting formed into a scary phantom image of different bloody faces. I painted that when I was young. Takeshi welcomed the guest. Come on, let us eat. Haruka sat beside her mother on the tatami floor in front of a chubadai or a Japanese table. Yumi has filled it with maki sushi, ramen, oden, neo, takoyaki, and sake. Hiroshi sat near his brother Takeshi, who sat on a zabuton. Yumi brought the moshibori or a small towel to clean their hands. Hiroshi wiped his hands with it but frowned when Haruka cleaned her face with it. Itadakimasu, Takeshi smiled as he clasped his hands, inviting everyone to eat. Haruka used the chopstick to grab the newly brought shujin ryori. Akemi knows that because of her blindness, she hasn't properly taught her daughter the proper etiquette of fine dining. She reminded her to watch her manners by whispering to her. Observe your table manners, Haruka, Akemi demanded. That is okay, we are a family, Yumi replied. She took the bowl of shujin ryori and gave it to Haruka. Shujin ryori is typically served with stewed beans, spinach with soy sauce and sesame seeds, or pickled cucumbers. You cook well, Hiroshi complimented Yumi after sipping a soup of ramen. We are happy that finally you accepted our invitation, Yumi mentioned. My husband is the eldest living member of the clan and wanted this gathering. We did not know that we have surviving relatives of the bombing, Akemi said. That event caused my blindness and the future of my daughter. The conversation became gloomy as they were all hurt by remembering the bombing. We could be better off if not for that event, but still you are the best mother in the world. Haruka changed the gloomy tone of the conversation. I heard you led an organization against nuclear weapons, Hiroshi asked his brother. Yes, but it failed. I already quit and there are still nuclear weapons today. Takeshi bit his lips. The effects of the bombing still lingers and yet our protest fell to deaf ears. Yumi wailed, I saw a great flash of light cut through the sky, from east to west, from the city towards the hills, and it murdered hundreds of people, including my parents. I was separated from you that day, Hiroshi, after seeing multiple corpses just lying on the ground, including the burned bodies of our relatives. Takeshi cannot contain it anymore, he also cried. As the conversation weaved through memories and shared experiences, the topic of the ongoing Abon festival was brought up by Yumi. Takeshi reminisced about the significance of the festival in their current situation, especially the belief that during this time, the spirits of their ancestors return to visit their living relatives. Haruka immediately raised her head and touched her mother's hand. Akemi raised her head as well and gently pressed back on Haruka's hand. As if on cue, Haruka shared that she and her mother were a medium, and explained that a medium is someone who has the gift of conversing with the departed. Everyone was looking at her and was astonished with what they are hearing. Haruka added that her spiritual gift is still growing as her understanding of the spiritual realm. She further explained that her mother, being an Itako, was multiple times more sensitive to the spiritual realm than she is. Akemi, ever the guide and mentor, spoke of her journey as a blind Itako and spirit medium. After which, her voice turned serious, and explained her encounter with the demon before they came here. She explained that during her battle with the demon, she was able to force it to admit the purpose of its attack. The Tanimoto clan is being targeted to be wiped off the earth. Akemi paused for a second and continued, that's why we came here. We need to band together with our ancestors and dearly departed to stop them, Haruka added. As a pastor, I would have disagreed with both of you, but with the unexplained death of most of our remaining relatives I am now inclined to agree. Takeshi gently touched Aksumi's hand. Yumi and Hiroshi nodded. Chapter 6. Breathe through panic. The Fazuma, or sliding doors, were shut, giving the room a darker appearance. The night's atmosphere was enhanced by the incense sticks and smoke. The Tanimoto family was getting ready for the ancient rites of Shokon no Matsuri, the festival of the ancestors, when the air was thick with wonder and expectation. The wandering soul is turned into a demon, and once it leads back to the realm, the soul would become a protective ancestor. Akesumi lectured before starting the ritual. This ancestor then would take care of the descendants. Haruko carried a bowl with a list of the names of her family members who had either died violent deaths or strange deaths. She was able to retain a list of these names thanks to her smartphone. The names were listed on a small piece of paper. An exquisite wooden table with spotless white linen stood in the room. The altar displayed a thoughtfully curated assortment of items that represented the family's respect and thanks for their dead ancestors. The candles were softly flickering, casting dancing shadows across the serene ambience of the room as they were lit. These shadows formed into different images and became threatening and gave a chill to Hiroshi, who just closed his eyes to avoid distraction. The Tanimoto family, clothed in traditional attire, gathered around the altar and bowed their heads in prayer. Takeshi, being the oldest family member, lit a bundle of incense, sending its fragrant smoke flowing gracefully upward as a living reminder of the past. Fragrant tendrils encircled the space, symbolizing the prayers and messages ascending to the departed spirits. One by one, the Tanimoto family members approached the altar, offering small dishes of traditional food and drink which was prepared earlier by Yumi. Everyone can smell the scent of freshly cooked rice, delicate fish, and seasonal fruits wafting through the air, mingling with the whispers of remembrance and gratitude. The Tanimoto family began reciting sutras and age-old chants in unison, combining their voices into a majestic chorus that matched the cosmic vibrations. They have no idea how they were able to accomplish it so naturally. The resonating rhythmic intonations gave out a strong spiritual aura that made the space feel as though the walls themselves were echoing the words of dedication and reflection. The altar started to shake, the vibration became stronger and the room appeared trembling. A tremendous wind appeared to sweep into the room, bringing the earth's elements together. They could detect the moistness of water, the heat of the fire, the roughness of the earth, and the intensity of the wind. Akesumi started communing with the dead through her daughter, Haruka, as a medium. Haruka pointed at the shuji which casted shadows of their deceased relatives. They became spiteful Urace, asking for revenge. With their force, they lifted Haruka and elevated her in the air. Haruka became unconscious at that time and moved like a kite in the air. She was lying in the air with her face facing the ceiling. Takeshi was terrified and cowered down. Yumi clutched his arm, frightened as well. They thought that their faith in God was strong and they can endure the presence of the spirits, but they were wrong. They realized that angry spirits are not easy to deal with. Akesumi suddenly took a few steps back, her face visibly disturbed. She raised her right arm towards Haruka, seemingly trying to catch her. At the back of his mind, Hiroshi is wondering how Akesumi even knows where Haruka is, given that Akesumi is blind and Haruka is floating in the air. Takeshi, demons are around us, Akesumi yelled with haste. You could hear the fear and deep concern in her voice. We need you to pray and consecrate everyone. Hurry. Takeshi did not waste any moment. He stood up and joined Lakshmi's sutras with his prayer. He laid his hand on everyone and asked God for consecration and protection. While this was happening, an unearthly growl echoed through the air coming from the deepest recesses of the room. The very foundation of the house seemed to shake under the weight of the malevolence. Yumi and Hiroshi's eyes widened in disbelief at what was happening. Hiroshi was extremely alarmed, while Yumi felt that their lives are endangered at that point. She took Hiroshi's arm and whispered, "If you believe in anything, now is the time to pray to that deity." Yumi then stood up and joins her husband Takeshi in praying over everyone. Hiroshi was devastated. Come to think of it, he never believed in anything. He never had the time nor the reason to. After all, how can anyone justify the existence of a god or a deity that would allow the suffering and devastation that they experience in Hiroshima? Ever since he was a child, he despised religion. Even under the tutelage of his adopted father, an officer of the Japanese Imperial Army who is a devout Shintoist practitioner, he rejects the supernatural and any belief in a god or many gods. From the corner of his eyes, Hiroshi caught something moving toward him from the dark corner of the room. He backed away and focused his gaze on the movement. The room is noticeably darker now than it is before. It is as if darkness has invaded the room that they are in. Something is moving in the shadows. Hiroshi's voice was wavering as he spoke. He pointed at the corner. There, he continued. Takeshi and Yumi looked at where Hiroshi was pointing at the same time. Move away from there, Hiroshi Lakshmi warned. Hiroshi wanted to move away, yet he can't. His muscles suddenly went stiff to the point that his breathing becomes intermittent. He looked around and the room seemed even more darker this time. He felt a tangible heaviness settle upon his shoulders. Yumi squinted her eyes to the corner where Hiroshi was pointing. Unbeknownst to her, she was staring at a malevolent presence that is starting to manifest from the depths of the shadows. Wisps of inky blackness coalesced, forming a grotesque figure that defied comprehension. She gasped and tugged at her husband's right arm. Yumi pointed at the figure with extreme fear on her face. Takeshi felt an extreme sense of dread as he watched the corner. Something evil is forming. The entity is a twisted amalgamation of nightmare and despair. He tugged Yumi and signaled her to get behind him. Yumi immediately went behind Takeshi's back. From the shadows emerged a gray-skinned creature of unimaginable terror. Its frame is skeletal, accentuating its emaciated and contorted limbs. Its eyes are burning yet hollow and vacant. The otherworldly fire in the creature's eyes pierced through Hiroshi's skepticism, challenging his disbelief in the supernatural. It started walking towards Hiroshi. Its movement was jagged and unnatural. You can see by its movements that it does not operate with the law of physics, because it seemed to glide effortless toward its target. On each step, the air in the room got more frigid, as if you are slapped by a winter breeze. A putrid stench of decay hung in the air, assaulting Hiroshi's senses. Suddenly, Haruka, who is still floating in the air, let out an ear-piercing scream. "Haruka, tell me what's happening." Lakshmi lost her footing and fell to the floor. She hit her head on a cabinet. At the same time, Haruka dropped hard to the floor. She was unconscious like her mother. Hiroshi gasped as the creature came closer. Its horrifying features became more discernible. The creature smiled with contorted anguish and malice. It has huge scars and keloids that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Part of its skin that has the huge scars has a purplish hue. The creature suddenly let out an ear-piercing otherworldly growl which is too much for Yumi to bear. She fainted, but Takeshi managed to catch her and laid his wife on the floor carefully. Takeshi sprinted as fast as an old man can to shield his brother from the coming creature. Hiroshi, who is still petrified in his place. "You will not touch my brother. Nor anyone of my family in this room," Takeshi said with a serious and extremely agitated expression on his face. The mouth of the creature formed a malevolent grin that revealed rows of jagged, razor-sharp teeth that dripped with a viscous, dark ichor. Its presence is overwhelming that the house itself seemed to cower. Shadows deepened and stretched, merging with the darkness that enveloped the creature. The aura of suffocating dread. Hiroshi gasped as he struggled to breathe. The air itself seemed to have grown heavy and oppressive. It feels like there's an invisible energy pressing on Hiroshi's chest that is suffocating the life out of him. Despite that, with all his remaining might and willpower, he managed to croak out the words, "I believe pain can be seen through Hiroshi's eyes, yet he is determined to breathe, he is determined to live, he is determined to protect his loved ones." He dismissed the pain and stepped forward. Takeshi took his sight away from the creature to assist his brother. He took his brother's left arm and hooked it around his neck to his shoulder. The brothers locked eyes with each other and nodded. The creature loomed over them, ready to pounce on the brothers at moment's notice. It emitted a low, guttural growl that reverberated through their bones, instilling a primal fear deep within them. "I believe in my brother." Hiroshi looked at his brother and nodded, to which Takeshi immediately acknowledged by nodding back. Takeshi started praying and rebuking the demon. The creature seemed startled and confused but decided to intensify its assault. Objects inside the room started levitating, while clay pots started shattering on their own. "I believe in my family." Hiroshi stepped forward once more to confront the creature. As if on cue, Yumi joined her husband in rebuking the demon, while Haruka stood up and helped her mother Aikesumi to get on her feet, after which, they both started a sutra for everyone's protection. Everyone walked toward Takeshi and Hiroshi and held each other's hands. The creature on the back foot cast an eerie green glow that bathed the room in an ethereal, unsettling light. It recoiled by retreating a couple more steps. Aikesumi started emitting an ethereal glow that is coming from within her. Everyone felt a soothing warmth that enveloped the atmosphere. The menacing presence of the creature started to falter when it sensed a greater force than its own from Aikesumi. The blind old woman raised her hand and spoke with strength and compassion. She started reciting ancient incantations that even Haruka did not know of. She called for the benevolent spirit to envelope everyone. Her words resonated around the room like an echo. The oppressive presence of the creature began to dissipate. The shadows started retreating and darkness turned into light that is coming from Aikesumi. The heavy air charged with malevolence has gone and is replaced with the serene protection of love. To everyone's amazement, the creature started transforming. Its twisted form began to soften, its appearance became less and less grotesque, and it shimmered as if cleansed by an unseen force. The hatred in its eyes turned into longing and remorse. Aikesumi reached out with compassion, to which the creature seemed to surrender to Aikesumi's healing presence. The once threatening entity transformed into a guardian of the clan. From that moment forward, the creature was transformed into a loyal and steadfast protector of the family, its essence forever intertwined with each and everyone, including those of the future generations. It has become a shield against malevolence. The protector will guide them through the challenges they would face moving forward. What was once a source of fear had become a symbol of strength and unity. Everyone hugged each other. This experience has become the bind that will repair the bond of their family. Chapter 7. The aftermath. As the last echoes of battle faded away, the room seemed to exhale and breathe, releasing any residual tensions and fear within their walls. Rays of sunlight filtered through the window. The members of the Tanimoto family smiled in appreciation of the beauty that lurks outside. They can see Takeshi and Yumi's neighbors doing okyoribi. This is the send-off ritual in which people float or release lanterns into the sky. Hiroshi remembered that this is the final day of the Obon festival. Takeshi hugged his wife and then his brother. He slowly walked to Akesumi and Haruka. Haruka smiled at her uncle. He reciprocated and proceeded to take and hold Akesumi's hand. "Thank you for saving the family," he murmured. Akesumi bowed and explained that every one of them did their part. Takeshi bowed at Akesumi and Haruka. Then they heard a loud music from outside. Haruka smiled and dashed outdoors and copied the dancers performing bonodori, a traditional folk dance. She looked very beautiful in her yukata, a kimono. She moves as though nothing happened to her last night. Akesumi followed and stayed in the ingawa or porch. She seemed to be looking at her daughter as if she were not blind. Yumi stepped outside and began to ignite a unique type of send-off fire known as Toro Nagashi. These are floating paper lanterns that contain candles and are launched into rivers or the sea. Takeshi and Hiroshi looked at them from inside the room and laughed together. Takeshi taps his brother on the shoulder and looked at him in the eye. "Remember, you are a Tanimoto, you are family," he said with his eyes beaming with love at his little brother. "I'm very proud of what you have been," he added and hugged Hiroshi. "I'm glad that I have met you again, brother. Thank you for not giving up on finding me," he replied with tears in his eyes. He took a step backward and vowed. "I'm leaving now, brother. I'll come and visit you and Yumi again later," he added while wiping his tears with his right arm. "I'm sure you will, but even if we're not here anymore, know that we are always with you," Takeshi vowed back. "Are you moving house, brother?" Hiroshi inquired. "It's hard to explain, I'm sure you'll understand when you leave the house." Takeshi hugged him one last time. Hiroshi slowly walked towards the door. He stepped outside and bowed at Akesumi. "I will be on my way," he explained to the blind elder. Akesumi acknowledges Hiroshi by bowing back at him. On his way out, he waved at Haruka, who is still dancing. She waved back and was all smiles. Yumi smiled at him. "At least stay till tomorrow," she tried to persuade him. Hiroshi apologized and explained that his father was waiting for him. "I understand," Yumi smiled tenderly. Hiroshi walked out of the house with a sense of tranquility. He has nothing but respect and gratitude for everyone he left behind in the house. The air was cool and breezy and he enjoyed the wind touching his face. He closed his eyes to reflect on what just happened. He knows that a bright future awaits him because of the inspiration that he got from his family. Lost in his thoughts, he found himself mesmerized by the sight of a man on the street. The man was holding a beautifully adorned lantern. With a flick of his hand, the man ignited the lantern's flame. Its warm glow cast a soft radiance that illuminated the night sky. Hiroshi watched in awe as the man released the lantern, sending it soaring into the heavens. The elderly man noticed Hiroshi and asked him why he came out of an abandoned house. Hiroshi frowned and looked back at Tanimoto's house. He was taken aback by what he saw. The Tanimoto house was dilapidated and taken over by nature. He ran back to look for Takeshi and Yumi, but he can't find them. He looked at the dancers in the streets hoping to see Haruka and his mother, but the taiko drums stopped and the dance finished and he can't locate them. Hiroshi returned to the decaying house and spotted a Butsudan altar frame. It showed images of Takeshi, Yumi, Haruka, and Akesumi next to a broken pot with a piece of a tied cloth containing the ashes of his relatives. Hiroshi dropped to the ground and picked up the broken pot. After a few minutes of contemplation, he walked out with the broken pot and went inside the car, where he noticed his side mirror showing phantom images of 4-odd smoke being sent to the skies. The end.